So today, what I want to do is to talk to you about economics of cloud and how do the numbers add up. How many of you in the room are service providers? How many of you work for service providers? 1, 2. Okay, anybody else? Well, for the service providers in the room, I'm your friend. Because I'm going to justify why does it make sense for customers to deal with you. Okay, just to first set the scene. In cloud, there is a duality of cloud. You've got a service provider and a service consumer. And next slide, please. So now, numbers that I'm going to present you, don't believe me. I am biased, but please check my numbers. You'll find that my numbers are indeed correct. Next. So, who's the service operator? The service operator is the person responsible for running a cloud system. And the responsibility of a service provider ends with provision of a compute environment. The service provider is not concerned about what goes on in the compute environment. And the service consumer, on the other hand, is only interested in using the cloud system. Is only interested in a flexible environment within which the service consumer can run their computing workloads. How that's provided? That's of no concern to the service consumer. And the service consumer is only responsible for what goes on in the compute environment, not the infrastructure. Okay? And so the service consumer would assume that the service operator is entirely responsible for the infrastructure. Yeah? And now, in a cloud system, economics really comes down to an operator matter. It is not something that concerns the service consumer at all. And so now let's look at the various modes of cloud. In a public cloud, what do we have? The service operator and the consumer, they just happen to be within the same organization. I got it mixed up. My apologies. Whereas in a private cloud, the operator and the service consumer, they belong to the same organization. Yeah? So, what about a hosted and managed situation? All that it means is that the operator is contracted to run the environment. But the operator is still there. So, in terms of economics, this comes down to how the customer can choose the environment and whether it is a private environment, it is a hosted or managed situation. We're not dealing with a public situation here. Okay? So now let's look at a high-level view of cloud costing. Broadly, the final price tag of a cloud service comprised of those few items: warehousing, connectivity, systems, and operations. So warehousing, this is roof, floor, power. And connectivity, that's your networking out to the external world. Systems cost, this is servers, this is networking, and operations cost, this is how to actually run the system. Okay. So if we take warehousing cost, let's break down warehousing cost further. It effectively comprises land, materials, building labor, energy cost, and facilities operations labor cost. Yeah? And systems cost, as we said, it's hardware plus software. Yeah? And operations cost, it's basically infrastructure operations, labor. So, now, again, we go back to the beginning. Cost of cloud is those 4 items: warehousing, connectivity, systems, and operations. So let's break it down to, this is, I've taken these individual items and I've expanded them here. Yeah? So, cost of cloud equals land, materials, building, energy, operations, connectivity, hardware, software, and infrastructure operations. Nothing new so far, right? So now, land cost. We can classify land cost as local cost. And what else is local cost? Materials, labor, energy, facilities operations labor, and infrastructure operations labor. These are all items that are local to wherever that is. The other items that are in black, they are global cost. The global cost, they're roughly the same wherever that you go in the world. They may change, but it's within small percents. It's roughly the same. Yeah? So, and based on this, let's look at how should a decision maker choose a system. So, how do you arrive at a decision that is economically sensible? So, for the enterprise decision maker, logical thing is you choose a service provider with lower local cost. Yes? Logical, yeah? And if you have a lower local cost, it makes sense to have your cloud operator itself. Yes? Or you can have it managed or hosted for you. It's one and the same. So the bad news is American cloud operators' price model is based on US cost. And US cost basis is higher than Vietnamese cost. So does it make sense to use cloud services of an American operator? Absolutely not. It is nonsensical to do so, yeah? And from an economic standpoint, it is a very bad idea to be exporting local currency, Vietnamese dong, to buy a high-priced US dollar, and then, come on, this is bad for economy, bad for your wallet. This is bad, 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 bad. Yeah? And no, I don't work for an economic development agency. Not today, anyway. So let's look at some numbers. These are numbers. The location A versus location B, and then the instance types you can guess which service provider that is. And these are real figures. Yes, they're a little bit dated, but last I checked, they're still roughly the same. Okay? So, surprise, surprise. In every single instance type, that particular service provider's cost for the region is higher than their cost in the US. How on earth is this logical? Now, there's a reason why Asia manufactures stuff. There's a reason why manufacturing is in Asia. So why the hell are we seeing cost in Southeast Asia being higher than cost in the US? Remember, we're talking about local costs being lower here. How on earth is this sensible? Yeah? So, are we supposed to continue this nonsensical practice? And I would contend that we need to have some sanity and run private clouds hosted locally, or run hosted managed clouds run locally. People, local cost here is a lot lower than US East. So let's not spend money stupidly. And now, these are cases of savings that we've seen with clients in a number of different industries. And this is stretched out over 5 years. On the second column there, this is a public cloud cost. These are real invoice-based figures. And the third column is where the customer runs a managed hosted cloud. Again, contracted figures. In other words, what you're seeing here is real money to real money. This is not an assumed case. And we see cost savings on the low end is 36%. On the upper end, it exceeds 80%. This is not cost in Vietnam, but it's not that different. This is cost in Indonesia. So you can extend from there, how does it compare to Vietnam? There is a reason why there's a lot of manufacturing in Vietnam. So you can see that you can reduce cost massively by choosing to run things locally, whether it is private or it is a hosted managed environment, simply due to the differences in local versus global costs. Come talk to me. I'm Kenneth Tan. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Dạ, mọi người có câu hỏi gì đặt cho diễn giả không ạ?
Or come find me later. Please.
Okay.
Okay. In Vietnam, about 70 to 80% of the cloud market and public cloud market belong to giant tech, mostly Amazon Web Service, and I think 70 or 80% of the market belong to Amazon come from, I think, big company or, finance, finance or the FDI, companies, such as, bank, or,
Yeah.
Foreign companies. So we still think that price can change their mind, but may not. Because this company or those companies, they follow their mother company structure,
Yes.
policy,
Yes.
and also it's quite hard to persuade them to convert or to migrate from Amazon cloud to OpenStack or open source cloud, because they still think that okay, it's maybe not stable enough, not secure enough, also not good service enough for them. And be frank, I think that OpenStack cloud compared to Amazon for the for the performance of the server of the instance cannot compare to Amazon Web Service.
Okay.
So, in your point of view, how can we compete with them? How can we grab the market from
Okay. So there,
text to local cloud?
there are a few points here that I want to address. One is the behavior of enterprises, behavior of the organizations, and two, it's the behavior of the service provider. Yeah. So the second line there, insurance, that case, it's actually the case from a FDI company in that particular country. Okay? Now, what we've seen is that the question is not just whether it is Amazon or it's OpenStack. Question is what is being purchased and how is it being used. And so where the customer sees that, well, we are buying a host, I mean, if you look at Amazon, what you get is effectively a hosted system, managed system. So you compare apples to apples in a managed environment, okay? And then, with regard to performance, in each of these cases, the hardware for the compute nodes, they were selected to match the specifications of public cloud with no overcommitment. And yet, this is the sort of savings that we're seeing. Okay? Now, I do recognize that there are situations where customers see, well, performance isn't that great. In quite a number of cases that we come across where customers have that view that performance is not great, the problem comes down to how the service provider is managing resources on the system. One factor is indeed overcommitment, and another is where they lack smart resource management system. So, let me give you an example. So, if you have, and this is particularly about OpenStack. Now, in a OpenStack system, when the system is configured to have however many vCPUs, and then you launch the VMs of however many vCPUs. So let's say you've set up a system to have 32 vCPUs. You ran 32 VMs, one vCPU each. OpenStack will say it's fully allocated, even if the VMs are sitting there idle. OpenStack says, too bad, it's full. In another machine, you could have the same config, 32 vCPUs, and you have the VMs being very busy. OpenStack doesn't know anything about it. So from the service consumer standpoint, this is negative experience. Because the one factor is the unpredictability, and another is that on one system you clearly have resource competition. So now what should happen is that there should be a smart resource management system there to track what is actually being used on the machine. And then calculate what is the optimal layout across the whole facility. And if you can do that, you can provide a much better user experience for the customer, for the service consumer. And this is actually one of the things that we do in our product, Sardina FishOS. Does that answer the question? Yeah?
You mean that we shouldn't do too much overcommit or no overcommit?
Smart overcommitment.
Sorry?
Smart commitment. So don't just blindly overcommit and then hope for the best. Blindly overcommit, that will end up with customers not happy.
So how do you do that?
If you're looking for an answer of how to do that, from a solution design standpoint, the mathematical problem that you need to solve is effectively a high-dimensional optimization problem. So, when you talk about high-dimensional optimization, think of a high-dimensional Tetris. And you're playing this high-dimensional Tetris continuously. That's what we do in our workload management system. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?
Can you tell about this FishOS Power Cloud, what they do? Do they build a private cloud for the customer?
So, FishOS, it can serve both public and private. So, because if we go back to the definition of public versus private, the only situation where, the only difference between a public cloud and a private cloud is whether the operator and the service consumer belong to or they don't belong to the same organization. But from an infrastructure standpoint, they're basically the same. Yeah? And so we see FishOS being used by operators operating both private clouds, hosted clouds, and public clouds. And our solution provides full distribution of OpenStack, Ceph, as well as the full suite of tools from deployment, operation, into upgrade. So the operations tool side of things, in addition to the usual things around log management, monitoring, etc., we also provide some much more advanced capabilities around workload management that I just mentioned, as well as health management. So health management is very important for a cloud operator because if you look at traditional monitoring, what does traditional monitoring do? The principle behind traditional monitoring is that you probe. If the other responds, you say, all good. Next cycle, you probe again. It doesn't respond. Not quite sure why. You probe 3 times, still doesn't respond. You declare an incident and you call the operator. Yeah? I've just described just about any monitoring system. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem is, by the time you declare an incident, you alert the operator, the impact on the service consumer is already evident. Service consumer already has negative experience. So, you don't want that. What we do is that we take in data, logs, metrics, and then we try to understand, is this a case of health or is this a picture of illness? And so think of it as in context of human health. Now, you can take patients, you put patients through an imaging system, and out comes certain images in relation to the patient. And then you put the images through a classifier. And the classifier will detect, okay, is this likely to be a case of illness, or is this likely to be a case of health? And if it's potentially ill, you alert the doctor, yeah? And the doctor could therefore, as a professional, the professional could then see, okay, is this something that needs attention, or is this not something that needs attention? So this gives you the ability to take preemptive action. And now, I often hear people saying, well, we just redefine the threshold. Does it work? No, it doesn't. Why not? Because, again, let's go back to the case of human health. If you redefine the threshold for death, because it's what it is, it's a dead or alive situation with traditional monitoring. If you redefine the definition of death, you're just burying a whole load of sneezing people. This is nonsensical, right? So our health management system takes in logs, takes in metrics, and we predict, is this likely to be a situation of health, or is this likely to be a situation of illness? And we also provide billing solutions, full system backup, migration tools, so a broad set of tools to run a system. And then 6 months later, with availability of a new release upstream, we provide a zero downtime upgrader. Okay? So that's, in essence, what our product does. Does this answer your question?
You come from Malaysia, right? You come from Malaysia.
I'm originally from Malaysia, yeah.
So in Malaysia, how many percent of on-cloud multi-SAP belong to SAP?
I haven't lived in Malaysia for over 30 years. Sorry.
So you based in Indonesia?
No, I live in Germany.
Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 7 minutes left. You have any questions?
Also, to expand on the question earlier, we do see this pattern of foreign companies operating in the regions because of the parent company behavior. They run on the public clouds. Now, but at some point, the parent companies, they are operating in the region for a specific reason. So, whether it is because that there is local cost that's lower, so for example, manufacturing situations, yeah. So those are cases where the foreign parent has very clear understanding of the differences in the local cost. And so in that kind of situations, it's very easy to get that conversation going to talk about local versus global cost. And now, you do have the situations also where the parent companies may not be as sensitive to local cost. However, in those situations, they are much more sensitive to margins. So if you can help the local operations lower their operating cost, thereby increasing margins, parent company no longer care about the religion of paying Amazon. Okay? Please.
Okay, thank you for the sharing. Regarding the question that you raised, this prior of the labor cost in Vietnam is lower than US, but the cost of the cloud in Vietnam is higher. But can you give some suggestion about the reason? From my point of view, it may be because of not using a right stack, like using your piece of ware, right?
So, there are a few parts to this answer.
Yeah.
So, you do have situations where the operator is basically charging a very high margin. So, in this particular case, from what we figured, it is actually a case of high margin because they could. You know which operator this is, yeah? Just by looking at the instance type. Now, in other situations, we have come across situations whereby a local operator ends up being more expensive as well. Why? So, in those situations, you see the operator may try to run a system. It may very well be OpenStack based, and yet they have very high cost. Why?
Why?
So, to answer this question, let's look at bread. Humans have been making bread for how many centuries? This is a known thing, yeah? How many people in the room has made bread ever? Anybody? Nobody. When you want to have bread, what do?
Go out and buy some.
Correct. You go to the shop and you buy a loaf of bread that's made in the factory. Could you bake your own bread? Sure you can. It's a lot higher cost. Why is it a lot higher cost? Because you don't have all the automation. Why don't you have all the automation? Because it's not your core business. You don't bake bread every day. Versus, in another situation, a bread factory bakes how many thousand loaves of bread an hour? So, whoever that is that does this at volume, they certainly would have much better cost base. So this is indeed the kind of situation that we get into, because we build our software based on OpenStack, but we take our R&D cost, our fixed R&D cost, and we amortize the R&D cost across that size of a base. Whereas another operator, they may do roughly the same sort of work in packaging OpenStack. But packaging OpenStack is only one of the steps along the way. And yet, just looking at their packaging work alone, they take that work, divide it across a much smaller install base. So their cost is certainly higher than us. Okay? And then, because there is much less tooling, much less automation, you see the ops cost goes up also.
Okay, yeah. Okay, nice. Agree. Okay.
All right, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Kenneth Tan.
Thank you. Come talk to me. Happy to answer.